Hello everyone, my name is Edward Bergham and thank you for coming to my scholar's presentation on how to invoke demons in order to smite your enemies and appease your friends. That's a joke, you can all laugh, although I think only 2 people in the audience really got the full extent of it. Yeah, so the actual title of my presentation is Witchy Business, Protest Elements Within Pre-Christian, Pre-Industrial, and Neo-Pagan Witchcraft. So my essential question for this talk is going to be, was witchcraft at any point during its history a protest religion? And in order to really dive into that, we have to first understand what a protest religion is. And because there's no concrete definition of what a protest religion is, I've offered my definition, which is a religion with values and practices that directly oppose a series of ideas or constructs present within a society. I'm particularly interested in this topic because I myself am a practicing witch, and I was fielded this question during kind of brainstorm for scholars, and I couldn't answer it, and it was really eating away at me, and I needed to know the answer. So first we're going to talk about pre-Christian witchcraft, and I think that pre-Christian witchcraft is not a protest religion for 3 major reasons. The first being that it upholds cultural norms of the time, it kind of supports the patriarchal views of the time, and it also upholds socioeconomic disparity. All things that usually protest religions aim to combat, which I get into in my paper, but don't have enough time for right now. So firstly, in Greek society, when Homer writes his Odyssey, they have he has Odysseus in order to, when he arrives on Circe's island and his men are turned into swine, in order to prevent himself from being turned into a swine as well, he's given, in some translations, the root pharmakia, which in Greek largely translates to the larger phenomenon of like healing herbs and medicinal plants, but in this case references a specific root that originates on the island of Phagos. And the people of that island once each year have a ceremony in which they draw down the moon in order to prevent themselves from turning into swine. So it alludes to the fact that Odysseus draws down the moon in order to prevent himself from being turned into a pig, which is an act of witchcraft. You're inviting this other celestial body into your body, right, so that you can obtain some of the power that it has and its major characteristics. And so it shows how the culture at the time is not against using witchcraft in conjunction with the worship of the regular Greek pantheon, right? Also in Egyptian society, we see the force of magic in Egyptian societies is called Heka. And it actually gives birth to the major gods of the religion. So Ra, the sun god, derives from magic which exists before the gods, which suggests that it's more important in a way, but also that they can coexist. But really in Egypt, what we see is that socioeconomic disparity is upheld by witchcraft because only people who have access to education are able to read from Thoth's Book of the Dead, which details how one can achieve an eternal resting place in the afterlife. Also, we see the rise of like professional witches in Egypt. You can purchase clay pots, which you can smash on the ground, and they have spells or effects that take place once you release their energy into the world. And of course, only people with the means to purchase those were able to use them. Also, in Roman society, we have the fascinum, which is obviously it's a phallically shaped object, and it was hung outside the doors of Roman homes in order to drive away the evil eye, which was this negative energy. And because we see a primarily male object chasing away this energy, I mean, it literally the description is that the wings literally it chases away the negative energy of the evil eye. Because of the dichotomy of male and female relationships, it's assumed that this negative energy is inherently female. So it's upholding patriarchal views, which doesn't make it a protest religion. Okay, so quick little bonus round, pre-industrial witchcraft in 15 seconds. Basically what you need to know is that there's not a lot of religion at all. It becomes, the Catholic Church really rebrands the witch as a symbol, normally female, and it says that in order to become a witch and be able to do works of magic, you have to make a deal with the devil, and then you're marked, and it's what we might think is Satanism today, but isn't. Satanism is actually the worship of the body. What it really is Luciferianism. But that's not important. It's only important because neo-paganism takes this idea of the witch that's created by the Catholic Church and kind of rebrands it in the 19th century. So 1923, Gerald Gardner invents Wicca, or not invents, gives birth to Wicca, and then after that, the Alexandrian tradition is birthed after Alexander studies. I think he becomes a first-degree witch only in Gerald's system. Anyway, neo-paganism is a protest religion, in my opinion, because it actively fights against the patriarchy. And so one of the examples of this is the ritual Beltane. So this is a maypole. Part of the Beltane ritual is constructing a maypole, and the part that not a lot of people talk about is when all of the men go off together, all the male identifying people in the ritual, they will obtain a large stick. It's a fertility ritual, by the way. They're going to obtain a large stick, and then the female identifying people in the ritual create a hole and protect it from the men with this big stick. They'll come along, they'll say, this is our stick that we're going to put in this hole, and then the female identifying people in the ritual will deny it for a period of time. And so it centers the female choice and consent within the ritual, which is why I think it combats the patriarchy. Also, the creation myth combats this. So when I talk about, there are several creation myths in Wicca and witchcraft. The one that I'm going to talk about postulates that there's one goddess who begins the start of the world, kind of the crucible of it, and as this all-knowing, all-powerful being is looking down into the pool of water that the universe is, she sees her reflection and loves it so much, loves her own reflection so much that she impregnates herself. And then she gives birth to the blue goddess, the kind of the younger self, a god of love, youthfulness, joyousness. And then this god grows up into the green goddess, the goddess of the vine. Who is more about fertility also, but also the growth and natural attuning with nature aspect of witchcraft. And then from there, that green goddess turns into the horned god, who has male aspects, but isn't inherently male because it's coming from a female goddess. They are the goddess of the hunt, but also the god of the sun. And then the kind of cycle whole repeats itself when the horn god consumes itself and turns into the goddess again. So it's a cyclical like myth, right? And it follows the waning and waxing of the moon in order to tell it. But what it suggests is that all of the magic in the world is coming from one female source, the goddess. And really it's an androgynous source, but in a way it not being male centers the female aspect as well, because most religions up to this point center male figures. Also, we have the birth of the goddess religion. It's now referred to, Wicca, witchcraft, neo-paganism is referred to as a goddess religion. And this is clearly seen in the birth of Dianic covens, which are covens comprised of only female practitioners, in which they use the same Wiccan practices that are set forth by Gerald Gardner and Alexander in their teachings, but they have more of an emphasis on the female body and female energies. And so that centers women again. But what do some other witches think? Because I'm just one little witch and not part of, not connected with everyone else. So I actually contacted Terence P. Ward, who's a magical journalist, and he actually just wrote his book, Empty Cauldrons, which suggests several ways that you can use magic to deal with depression, and why maybe witches are more prone to depressive episodes than any other group of marginalized people. So he says that folk magic is a tool of the oppressed, and when witchcraft is part of a religion, it's always part of the resistance. Magic isn't the only reason though. Wicca and earth-centered religions are about turning away from the crowd in order to seek a different way to be in the world, often inspired by ancient wisdom. Now here he makes a very clear distinction between witchcraft and religion, which is what Jude Magaro-Padilla over here says. He says, I ask him whether or not witchcraft is a protest religion, and he responds, no, it is not. Witchcraft is not a religion, it's a practice. Then we have an hour-long debate about secular witchcraft versus religious witchcraft. And at the end, we kind of conclude that when religious witchcraft is taking place, it is a protest religion because of the research that I did. It centers, well, the thing that I talk about in this presentation, it centers the female voice, but there are also other reasons that I get to in my paper. But secular witchcraft is not a protest religion. So thank you very much for coming. Any questions? Yeah.
Do you think that because Jared Gardner, I think the previous name was, and the other author you referenced, they're both male, do you think that influences like the fact that they wrote and have like introduced this religion in the 21st century, that influences whether or not it is
a protest religion? Yeah, I mean, certainly. I think Gerald Gardner actually, he when he creates witchcraft, he doesn't do it in the best way. It's kind of, because witchcraft at the time is illegal in England still, he does it kind of under the radar, and he only accepts married heterosexual couples into his coven. And that's why kind of the Alexandrian tradition is more so, I think modern witches today can follow Gardnerian structures of like ritual, but they look more towards Alexandrian like techniques and beliefs. So the neo-paganism that we see today is very different from the Wicca that Gerald Gardner exists in some ways, but it borrows most of the foundations. So I think really what makes it into that protest religion is the birth of Dianic covens and the kind of switch there. Yes.
I'm interested in that bottom quote where witchcraft is not religion. And help me out, is there sort of a centralized set of beliefs around witchcraft? Is there a hierarchy, like a church hierarchy? How unified is it?
Yeah, so witchcraft is mostly a solitary practice, unfortunately. You can come in together in covens and group studies in order to explore ritual and power and to raise more energy. And there are hierarchies as far as like, oh, I'm a first degree, witch. I'm a high priestess. I'm a high priest. But the way that rituals are structured, they're supposed to be non-hierarchical. So even though there's one person who is maybe in charge of leading a ritual, they do not hold power over any other participant in the ritual. As far as what is secular witchcraft? Who here has had a birthday where they blow out candles on a cake? Yeah. You are making a wish when you blow those candles out, and then your sacrifice, the cake, you're cutting it up and eating it and consummating it. That's a ritual right there. You just performed secular witchcraft. So it really refers to more, you can find it a lot in folk traditions and cultural traditions, more so than religious witchcraft, which is kind of written about, talked about, like organized-ish. Again, it's not very organized, but it is more organized than folk practices in secular witchcraft. Yes?
I would say that any religion that starts off is essentially a protest religion in the beginning. Like, it's kind of hard not to be, or else it wouldn't get off the ground on some level. So I guess I'm wondering if you think it's inevitable, because I know Neo-Paganism, I know it harkens back to old symbolism and stuff, but it's still newish. Is it inevitable? What do you think? Is it always going to be a protest religion, or is it going to kind of follow the path of most religions, which is that it ends up not being at some point?
That's a really interesting question. I think that the nature of how witchcraft is created kind of alludes where we can find this answer. Margot Adler, in her book Drawing Down the Moon, has a fantastic, I'm going to paraphrase it here, but she says that basically when Gerald Gardner is creating the Wiccan system of like witchcraft, he kind of borrows anything that's not nailed down, any religious practice that's not nailed down to the floor. So I think the spirit of including aspects of really people, someone's angry at me.
Just ignore it.
Sorry. So because it's including practices from a bunch of, Jewish mysticism, it borrows elements of Jewish mysticism, Hinduism, a bunch of other like folk religions too. Because it's so inclusive of other ideas, religions, and beliefs, I think that it may be in a special spot because it can kind of pivot and choose what it wants to draw on in the moment. And also the fact that most of it is kind of group practices in a coven that aren't kind of held to a larger system means that within your coven you can kind of decide what is the right thing to worship, what's a way that we can move. So, and you can see that in the creation of dynamic like covens and also more inclusive covens. I know the Beltane ritual, definitely when Gardner performed it, those were definitely heterosexual couples that were dancing around the maypole and kissing each other as they passed. But in modern Beltane rituals, it's you have homosexual couples, couples from all walks of life and different sexual identities like included. So I think that it's in a unique spot and has a unique ability to pivot, and that's why it may be more relevant as it goes on and not fall into hierarchical structures.
Well, last question, and then we have more presentations.
Do you think that the newness of the Neo-Pagan religion has made it less sort of credible or less able to be seen by the public as a real religion? And has that been harmful to the religion?
I think that it's kind of a two-edged sword because on the one hand, we're definitely still dealing with the cultural view of the witch, which is set forth in the 1700s by the Catholic Church. The witch is a pop culture icon now. But the neo-paganism is coming back because there's this drive within Europe and America and other places in the world to look back to more older religions, older ways of thinking and tuning with nature. And so I think that piece has kind of saved it and made it be more relevant. Also, I think that people fall down the path of oh, this looks cool, I want to learn more about it, and then they kind of stumble into the truths of witchcraft, and then by researching it for fun, then they gain a deeper understanding of what witchcraft is and a greater appreciation for it, and therefore can find it and practice it in their daily lives. Thank you.